60 Minutes with Angela starts right now.
With 14 directorates, 14 zonal commands, 11 state area commands, and 10 special commands situated in Nigeria's air and sea ports, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency has structured its approach through three major programs. First, offensive action. Second, the War Against Drug Abuse, WADA. And third, the National Drug Control Master Plan. And its 11th chairman and chief executive officer, appointed in January 2021, a former governor of Lagos State and Borno State, Buba Marwa, a retired brigadier general, joins me on the program today. Now, let's talk about WADA, War Against Drug Abuse. What is the focus or template of the War Against Drug Abuse? What is the vision of it?
In my first statement after I took over in January last year, I said, by the grace of God, this agency will be respected and feared by the criminals, and that is happening. And we can't show mercy because they don't show mercy to Nigerians, to our families, to our youths, to the children. So this is why we go all out fully after these people. The gentleman we arrested 2 weeks ago had 103 accounts. As it happens, he always moved with a retinue of security personnel armed. And if we moved in those circumstances, it could lead to shootings. And so we had to await the moment when he will be vulnerable, and that was after he boarded the flight and the security had left. So we are conscious. We don't deliberately go out to embarrass, but when we move based on hard evidence of what somebody has been doing to Nigeria. Absolutely. We do a lot of work. We have partners also who we work with. We work with the Americans, the French, the Germans, the British, and others. Because, it's international now.
Well, so immediately you resumed office, you launched the offensive action program. Was that the result of all the work and consultation that you had carried out before your appointment was official, and that's as chairman of the Presidential Advisory Committee on the Elimination of Drug Abuse, PACEDA?
Actually, the PACEDA took about 7 months to conclude. Partly so, in answer to your question, From PACEDA, we were able to come up with some recommendations on how we should deal with the dog scourge. And one of the key elements has to be the elimination of drugs itself from our streets. And this is a war. The proportions of the prevalence is of such a magnitude that we have to treat it as a war. And there are principles of war that are subsisting. There are actually 10 principles of war. Offensive action is one of those principles. What does that mean? It means you cannot win any war on the defense. You have to go out after the enemy. In this case, our adversaries are the traffickers and the barons. So indeed, the offensive action was the first onslaught, and we did it based on principles, and it has yielded returns.
So, according to you, the NDLEA Act is still inadequate. Is that why the agency has to rely on a combination of laws to achieve prosecution and conviction? And I'm talking about laws like a Money Laundering Act and the Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, for instance.
Absolutely, because the drug thing is international in scope, and we have to have a lot of, should I say, memoranda of understanding with others, legal treaties, and so on. But the main law, though, is our act, and even that we have found is inadequate. That's why it is at the moment undergoing review and amendment. For instance, we have the issue of fines. We want to remove that.
Well, since you've mentioned the matter of fines, let's talk about that. Your rationale, for instance, for wanting to expunge the option of fines from the laws that set up the agency. Is it because the fines are too small? You have called them ridiculous. What do you mean by ridiculous? What amount is ridiculous?
When you convict an offender in court and pass a sentence, it is both to punish him and also to serve as a deterrent to society. And we observe that, there's so much money in drugs. We all know that. A little amount, and that's why people take the risks. And so what we did is we discovered the judges who have the discretion sometimes give fines as options. And the fines could be as low as 3,000 naira, 5,000 naira.
Which is a drop in the ocean.
It's nothing, and just pay and he's free. That's the main reason that we wanted this option completely to be removed, and the jail sentences to also be stiffened a little bit more so that it serves its purpose. However, that brings us to the Pharmacist Council bill, which already the fines are there, but it's going to be stiffened. For instance, there are over 1 million patent medicine stores in the country that are illegal, not properly, over a million, not properly licensed. And if you look at the acts, the Pharmacist Council, the fines are so, 50 naira, 20, old 200 naira.
Oh Lord.
Yes, those in the new bill are also being stiffened to like 5 million and so on to dissuade. So fines have their own place.
Now, however, in calling for life sentences, are you making a distinction between the class of drugs, for instance, the type of drugs that you will be imposing these punishments for? It's
all contained in the acts. It depends on what you are arrested with, the quantity, because you have to determine, is this a trafficker or a user? Different conditions. But the judges have the discretion. We know that the use of drugs that leads to addiction is a disease. and we are moving towards not criminalizing it. But even then, we do this very carefully, because in a country like Nigeria, if you say we will not criminalize use, and mark you, use is still an offense, possession is still an offense, so we also use our discretion. But that said, more often than not, those who use, we try to counsel and treat them. That's actually the goal. So for that reason, from the period that I've been here, a little over a year, we've arrested 15,000. 8,000 have been counseled and rehabilitated. So it's not all that we try to prosecute. And we've also got convictions of about 2,000. Yes, so there's a fine balance. We determine who should be prosecuted, and who needs actually counseling and treatment. We have counseling centers in all our commands. We determine within the centers in our command whether we have the capacity to treat a particular case, or the case needs to go to full rehab centers. We don't handle addicts as such, even though the correct word now is no more addicts, but dependence, drug dependence. Those who are not addicted, and that's 80% of the lot, and that's a huge number. With 15 million using drugs, 80% is a huge number. That's like 12 million. But in addition, we're in the process of setting up a call center also. This should be ready in under 4 to 6 weeks. The call center will be made up of counselors, psychologists, and doctors and nurses who will take calls 24/7 from people, because still in Nigeria there's stigma. Some people don't want to. They have this situation. They need to be treated, but they don't want to come out. So this is an outlet. They can talk, be guided, and when you have a problem of drug use, it's not all the time, except when you are in a rehab center itself, where it shuts down and there's no way you can get it. But if you're outside and probably you take a certain quantity of Tramadol, let us say, or smoke, the experts suggest there's a gradual process when you are being treated.
To avoid what they call cold turkey.
Exactly, you can't cut off. So maybe if you are taking a certain quantity, it is reduced over time, gradually. Yeah.
What kind of offense, in your opinion, would justify a 15-year jail term without an option of fine?
Well, you should be asking that question from a director of prosecution and legal services. But it is clearly stated in the Act. I think they range from 15 to 25 years. Cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, such.
So beyond psychedelic drugs like marijuana, cocaine, heroin, what about the abuse or misuse of psychotropic substances, like sniffing glue, sniffing the fumes from Sokowade, and even orthodox medication like Xanax, codeine, and Benylin?
Those are opioids, actually, the classification that you mentioned. Each has its own, for the most part, like cannabis, codeine, tramadol, those are far easier to treat compared to ecstasy, amphetamines, and so on. They are very, very complicated drugs, and once you get addicted to those, given the physiological reactions on the body, the brain, the spinal system, the nervous system, the heart disease that come, they're different.
And that brings me to the question of zonal attraction. For instance, are there certain drugs peculiar to different zones? You know, Nigeria has 6 geopolitical zones. So are there drugs that are peculiar to each zone? For instance, talking about Umpuru Mmiri in the southeast, which seems to be the dominant drug of use there.
They are mostly based on availability of the drugs. So the southwest zone, for instance, has a prevalence of 22.4%. Now that is the highest. That's almost 1 in 5. And why is that so? Because the growing of cannabis. There are 10.6 million Nigerians that use cannabis. I know cannabis is smoked, is eaten, is drunk, all kinds of ways. And next is the South-South, which is close to 17%. Again, cannabis, because Delta, Edo, those areas grow.
They have the soil for it?
The prevalence. The prevalence of the soil, but they've long been in this business. So the availability is really the main, and you can also go into other factors in those regions. Now the opioids are more in the north, and it's interesting, I will tell you, because those who buy or traffic in it, which is leaning towards a particular geopolitical zone, don't appear themselves to use it, but they send it, northwards.
Yes.
But we are dealing with it. We are dealing with it. There's a lot of money in this business. Where the NDLEA is dealing with it, we are making all the appropriate seizures. You will probably, if you've been following the news, quite recently we grabbed one of those barons that specialized in Tramadol.
To be honest, Tramadol, for example, is a legitimate orthodox medication for pain. The danger now is that we criminalize a normal drug and prescription users, for instance, orthopedic patients, who are now liable to be victimized either by arrest or just for being in possession of Tramadol. Arresting anyone for importing Tramadol into the country is not an offense per se, because Tramadol is a legitimate drug. So, what is the offense in the importation of Tramadol?
Actually, Tramadol is not even scheduled yet, but Nigeria is one of the countries pushing for it.
When you say it's not scheduled yet,
the UN, schedules in the international conventions, but we have the experience now that it is being used for the wrong purpose. 100 milligrams and below is legal and allowed, and is part of the pain relief measures after surgeries and so on and so forth. No problem with that. But over that is illicit. And so the one in question that you mentioned was 200, 220, 225 milligrams. So that is bought simply for intoxicating purposes and to raise money.
Join us again after the break. Okay, so now we know that the approved dosage and milligrams of Tramadol that can be imported into the country legally is 100 milligrams. But are there any circumstances whatsoever under which a higher dosage, say 250 milligrams of Tramadol can be imported into the country?
No, that's actually what happens. They actually tell them to do 250 milligrams or 225 milligrams. And we've observed that even in the packaging, it's written for export only from those countries.
Because they know they shouldn't be doing it.
You know, it's quite they're unscrupulous business people everywhere. And I should mention the main country at this point in time where they import the Tramadol is India. This is not supported by the Indian government, I must say very quickly. And we already are in talks with my counterparts in India, who I'll be visiting at some point this year, to do an MOU for us to collaborate. In India itself, I know that 50% of international traffickers are from Nigeria.
In the Tramadol?
Drugs. Tramadol and drugs in India, yes. So Nigerian drug traffickers are playing a significant role there, to the chagrin and unhappiness of the Indians themselves. Just an example. But we are working, as I said, together. As you have seen, a person imports 22 billion naira worth in 1 month. It's 1 month. So who knows what has been happening even before that. And that's how there's so much money, the attraction is there for these people, they don't care. And now the drugs also go to fuel insecurities. Because I've seen all kinds of criminalities happening because of drugs. So these people, they don't have any conscience, they don't care, they just their pockets. But we are making definite progress because from January last year, we've seized about 3.5 million kilograms of assorted drugs. That is significant because imagine if that had found its way to the streets. And also the money, that's about 130 billion naira. If this, even a fraction of this money had entered their pockets, imagine what they could have done with it.
So we see some countries all over the world decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana. We've also seen other countries embracing marijuana as a commercial venture capable of earning revenue for their countries. But you disagree with, for instance, the Ondo State Governor, Akeredolu, who's rationalizes the commercial possibilities of marijuana. My question is, doesn't secrecy fuel attraction to a drug like marijuana?
First of all, the esteemed governor is my friend, and he's a senior advocate. He needs funds to run the programs in the state. I've been in state administration and I quite appreciate where he's coming from in terms of funding, except that we can never support funding from any activity that is both illegal and harmful to Nigerians and the Nigerian society, which is the case with cannabis. 10.6 million Nigerians use cannabis. At the moment you say it's legalized, because you know the conditions prevailing that lead to the use of drugs are still there, isn't it?
Yes.
But as you said, they do it in hiding and so on and so forth. Now you open the door, that's it. And the other argument, they say, well, you know, NDLEA, you can control that. How? We are trying to control tramadol, codeine, methamphetamine.
Yes.
So it's a very complicated thing. And even the World Health Organization itself recognizes that smoking or eating or using hemp causes health defects of the brain. That is not something anybody will joke with. And we know for a fact that the criminals, the insurgents, bandits, kidnappers and so on,
Yes.
they rely on this. We talk with people who have been kidnapped and released, and they tell us they spend the whole day smoking. Yes, so this is a very critical, this is something we don't want to joke with at all. We won't accept it, because up till this moment there are no studies, legitimate studies,
Yes.
that have proved the effect of these so-called medical marijuana for medicinal purposes. There are none. And those who have, in the Americas and Canada and so on, some of the states, mark you,
Yes.
even the US government itself has not recognized it,
Yes.
by the states, have also, in those places, we found criminal activities, road accidents, and such,
Yes.
have increased, in some cases 3 times, because of this.
Well, in addition, you are weaponizing asset forfeiture against arrested, jailed, or indicted drug barons. Now, I can understand jailed and convicted. If our laws say innocent until proven guilty, why seize assets of people who are arrested or indicted, people who a court of competent jurisdiction have not declared guilty?
In fact, we have the power to go into any property that, in our esteemed calculations,
Yes.
based on intelligence, they are proceeds of drugs. We have that power with the authorization of the Attorney General or the Federation.
Yes.
But this type of forfeiture is not a final forfeiture. Only the courts ultimately will grant that. And the reason for this is you don't want to encourage the business. It's a business. Huge sums of money. There was a time during the COVID pandemic that a kilogram of cocaine in some countries was worth $500,000. Of course, it is coming down now.
Yes.
So
Because of the lockdown.
yes, the scarcity and so on and so forth. So for this purpose, we have to make sure that if you are engaged in this business and think that after conviction and spending time in jail, you come back and enjoy the money, you think wrong, because you won't find it, because we would have forfeited it to government. We have a Directorate of Assets and Financial Investigations. We also have a Directorate of Intelligence. We also have another Directorate of Operations and General Investigations. They all work in tandem.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, we will do justice. We will never deliberately do injustice in the NDLEA. So they will sort out what was there, because dates, you have to dates. We will work out, we'll go into the accounts and stuff, and we're able to determine without great difficulty, believe me.
That brings me to your call for drug tests to be convicted on all who want to be part of any of the security agencies. I mean, wanting to join a security agency, demanding a drug test for those sort of candidates, that seems rational to me. But why target prospective grooms? Why do you want to profile people? Just because. Shouldn't there be a reasonable suspicion before you order a test on a prospective bridegroom? Are you not trampling on their rights?
It's both, but it's a suggestion.
Yes.
It's not the law yet.
Would you like it to be a law?
We would, be happy if it was, because it's for the good. It's for the public good. When you do public policy, it's for the public good.
Yes.
Now, but it doesn't have to be a law. When a bride and groom marry in Nigeria today, they do HIV.
Yes.
They bring it. They do genotype.
Yes.
They bring it, but it's not the law. They feel it's the right thing to do. And if you ask, I could ask you that, I don't know if you have a daughter of marriageable age. If I asked you, would you like her to marry a drug addict? I'm sure you know the answer to that.
Yes.
So it's just one of the strategies for drug demand reduction. Because our youths, once you finish your schooling and you have a job,
Yes.
marriage
Yes.
will probably be the next thing you want to do. And there are millions of youths in this category. And we want to reduce. If you know they will not allow you to marry you if you are positive, you will stop the habit. And in any case, the point is not necessarily that they will stop you, but at least they will know you have a situation, because the girl may put her feet down on the groom that this is the man I want to marry.
Yes.
And you say, okay, but get treated. Go for treatment, and so on and so forth. The same thing with the politicians.
All right, in 2023, that's next year, we will be electing a new president. You have urged all political parties to make drug tests a part of screening requirements for all aspirants. This is the stance that you have wanted to happen for a while. In fact, you go further to say that all office holders should be subjected to drug tests as well. Do you have any particular evidence that drugs is a problem among our political class?
Some of them are actually traffickers. We've arrested quite a number, because the politicians actually give drugs to their supporters and so on and so forth. Yeah, and they cause great disturbance and the like. First of all, by the way, that statement that I made was in response to a question by the journalist at the time. And immediately I read in the papers, Marwa wants Vice President Oshimbanjo, wants Atiku, right, to be drug tested. Why did they all rush to the presidential candidates? We have to go down to the councillors.
Yes.
Actually, councillors. In fact, that's where the danger lies, I can tell you, at the grassroots. Because it is at the grassroots that you have more abuse. They are more in number anyway. So you go from councillors, members, chairmen, and so on. The little money that they have to work for the community, they will spend it because they are dependent on drugs. They will use they will use it. And secondly, as I've continued to say, head no go correct.
Yes.
If you are using drugs.
Yes.
So how can you supervise and superintend over the public? Yes, with scarce resources. And the decision-making process is key in public office. But you can't make the right decision because your brain is not straight. I'm happy to say the chairman of the House of Reps Committee on Narcotics and Drugs is in the forefront of promoting drug tests as a principle. Because look at the students, for instance. The universities are awash with students. And you remember, as a graduate yourself, character and learning. By the time you get that degree, so it's not just the degree on learning, exactly, but the character. And you can't be smoking, and joining calls, killing your fellow student, and so on and so forth. That's why we're also making this recommendation, which is well received in the academic communities because they are facing this problem, that let them do drug tests. So it's not to send them away, sort of expel them, but send them to counseling. Let them go and be counseled, rehabilitated, and then they can come back.
At the budget defense of the NDLEA before the House Committee on Narcotics, you described the proposed 2022 budget allocation to the agency as a great improvement on its fortunes and on previous budgets. So what kind of budget did the agency have before 2022 and what is it now?
The budgeting process, nobody ever gets what he needs.
Yes.
But the main thing this year that excites all of us is the barracks. That's it. We have never had barracks in this agency, and it is His Excellency President Muhammadu Buhari, out of sympathy and a keen sense of what is happening and understanding. In fact, the day I went to defend barracks before him, I thought it would take me much longer.
You didn't have to say much.
I didn't say much. He picked it up right away because your men, officers and men, are in the streets. They arrest these people, send them to jail, and go back and live among them.
Yes.
Because no barracks. And then they come back and burn the houses, assassinate, and so on. So we're very excited and grateful to him.
Now, on the NDLEA website, there are over 104 NGOs, that's non-government organizations, listed on that website. What do they do with the NDLEA?
We partner. We partner with them. The business, as you know, especially of drug demand reduction, goes beyond us. It also includes other agencies of government, like NAFDAC, the orientation movement, and so on. But those NGOs are key to our work. The advocacy part of our work, they carry out a lot of it, and we are grateful for their efforts.
Join us again after the break. Welcome back to my concluding moments now with retired Brigadier General Buba Marwa, the Chief Executive Officer of the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency. A lot was made of the proposed drug training center that was proposed in Ikeja, Lagos State, and to be built by the German government at a cost of 2 million euros. Is it now in existence? What is the status quo of that dog training center?
It's in process. The dogs, we have to say, the Germans, we are very grateful to them. Recently, they also gave us vehicles that will move the dogs in comfort. So far, all the dogs we've used have come from them, and now they are themselves constructing a dog training center in Ikeja. We've got the land, handed it over to them, and the designs have been concluded. So it's something they have told us in 3 years or so, it will be ready. Now we have dogs mostly in Lagos, but occasionally in some other places, which I would not say. Yes, but they've been very, very helpful in cracking some of the difficult cases, like the methamphetamine case that they cracked sometime last year. 500,000 inbuilt an engine. We couldn't know where. We know this container contains it, and this is the machine, but we don't. Where is it? So we had to break it to pieces, get the motors out, and it was the dogs that cracked it for us. We are very grateful for the effort.
Let's talk about your partnerships now with the United States Drug Enforcement Agency, the Gambian Drug Enforcement Agency, and the agency in India. The partnership with the Indian government was to be signed this year, 2022. What is the aim of such partnerships beyond training? I mean, is it from training alone that we're benefiting from these partnerships?
First of all, with America, DEA, and with Gambia, they already signed. And India, it's in process. As I said, the whole business of drug trafficking is international now. You know, the world is a global village. You fly, go by sea, and so on and so forth. So we have partnerships to exchange mostly information and intelligence so that we can deal with it. In other areas, these are older agencies in some of these countries, more sophisticated, and they support us with training, with equipment, intelligence, logistics. They don't give us money, yes, but they help with tools.
You have said that the ultimate goal of the NDLEA is to make Nigeria drug-free, and to that end, you are pursuing drug supply reduction goals. What do you mean by that?
It's like a roadmap with definite sort of signposts as you move. It has 4 pillars. Drug supply reduction, yes, is one, which is the elimination of actually drugs. In that we go out and seize it wherever it is. And in the plantations we burn them, cannabis and so on. Prosecute the offenders, seize their assets, and so on and so forth. So those have their own range of work. Then the drug demand reduction has to do, that's the second pillar. Yes. It has to do mostly with advocacy, preventive first, because we want to prevent. We have to sensitize Nigerians from all strata not to do drugs, and those who do it to go for treatment, which means there needs to be more rehabilitation centers and so on and so forth. So that one is there. And then the third pillar, which is the access and availability to control substances. That is actually anchored by the Minister of Health and NAFDAC, because these are controlled drugs, that's right. The diversion of it, for instance. So they have strategies that they're working, and we're all working together. And the last pillar is governance, mainly, which has to do with the leadership and the structure of it. For instance, I chair the Interministerial Committee of 37 ministries and agencies at the apex of the whole drug fight under the supervision of the President himself. And at the state level, we have drug control committees, and we are pushing, and this has started yielding fruit, that this is cascaded down to local governments and communities. You have the War Against Drug Abuse committees. In the schools, what used to be drug-free clubs, also now War Against Drug Abuse clubs.
That's WADA.
That's WADA. It's right there. Motor parks, markets, ministries. So it's a continuing effort. Yeah, that's what it is.
I understand, but before your appointment, staff welfare was almost nil. Job satisfaction among members of staff of the NDLEA was very low. Now, so we have 800 or so officers of the NDLEA petitioning the Office of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice over non-promotion for 12 years or so now. What is the situation as we speak?
when you ask the question, you say it's one of, did you say one of the saddest or unhappy question you wanted to raise? Yes. And I will now change it back to happy, because when we took over, we found an agency that had not promoted adequately. And some have remained stagnated for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years.
No promotion.
No promotion. So we went to work with a harmonization committee and actually promoted 75% of the entire workforce. I don't think this has happened anywhere.
Yes.
In the entire workforce. Now, those who complained are within the remaining 25%. Unfortunately, they don't understand that I can't promote 100%. You can't promote 100% because there are vacancies. Ranks are tied to vacancies. For instance, in a state command, you can only have one commander of narcotics, CN rank. You can't have two, unless there's a slot somewhere. So the same thing, deputy commanders, assistant commander generals, all these. There has to be vacancies, and also within the context of Nigeria, you can't face all the promotion to one side. So that has been handled, and we explained, yes, you may actually be qualified, but unfortunately, not everyone on this particular occasion will be promoted. But every year we have promotion exercises, and as some retire, others will fill up the vacancies. We've expanded, like the zonal commands. The zonal commands 14 that you mentioned, they were non-existent. We created that. That has created room for expansion. We've put up a few more directorates at the headquarters. We've expanded the strike force from 100 to 800, and so on.
Now, Mr. Chairman, you have been in office as NDLEA boss for just over a year. Has President Muhammadu Buhari left any footprints in the fight against drug abuse?
I must say with a loud voice that in the war against drug abuse, the main character that has propelled our successes is actually President Muhammadu Buhari, who launched the war against drug abuse himself in June 2021 during the International Day Against Drug Abuse. You have to remember that as a precursor to our appointment today, he set up PACEDA, the Presidential Advisory Committee for the Elimination of Drug Abuse, in which I must mention that Her Excellency the First Lady played a defining role in setting, she was deeply involved and even agreed to be a member of it with Her Excellency Mrs. Oshimbajo. And once the recommendation was submitted, there could be no greater purposefulness than his appointing the chairman of PACEDA to lead the war, which is quite unusual. Most cases, you submit a report and that's the end of it. But now they say, okay, you submitted these recommendations, go and act it. And the passion and compassion is very critical, because the first things we did was, in addition to the offensive action, to motivate the staff. And we found almost every member of staff owed something. The agency was owing almost everybody money, either travel allowance or posting allowance. Everybody was owed. And the worst was those who died in action in the agency. Can you imagine that they themselves will contribute money for burial? Immediately these facts were presented to the president, he quickly mobilized, approved funding, and we paid to the last dead family, this type of funds. He's done the barracks, as I said, and he's given all the other encouragement. So far, nothing has gone from the agency before him that he has not approved.
Thank you for speaking with me today, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I'm Angela Ajetunmobi.